It's Waxing Lyrical, baby.
Hello, Waxers, and welcome to Waxing Lyrical with Mainz and Dutts. I'm your host, Mainz, and my colleague, a man who thought he was unlucky until he realised he wasn't a Jets fan. It's Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
So I had a message from our friend Mullum, and I've seen a tweet from Dan Hanses, another of our friends, and both of them seem to be along a similar theme of why.
What did I do to deserve this franchise as my supporting base? I don't know. And for those who are unaware, today's Thursday, the 19th of August, and maybe an hour and a half ago, Carl Lawson was carted off on a stretcher, suspected torn Achilles.
A, that'll hurt.
Been there, done that. I can confirm it hurts.
B, of course, he's been having a wonderful camp.
Of course.
Because it wouldn't be funny otherwise. And C, they gave him a lot of money and hoped that maybe they'd have a good edge rusher for the first time since John Abraham. So it's all going well.
See, the problem I have with it's funny.
Like, it's not funny.
No, not him, not his injury, but like stuff, bad things happening to the Jets stop being funny. Like about a decade ago, like haven't they suffered enough? It is the Simpsons stop. He's already dead.
Yeah, it goes from being, unfortunate to being funny to then just looking like bullying.
That's what I'm saying, right? That's what I'm saying. But anyway, we don't need to talk about the Jets, luckily, because we've done the AFC East and said they're not very good. This week we talk about the AFC West, where we have a great team, two really intriguing teams, one with a quarterback, one without, and the Las Vegas Raiders. We're also going to, I think, finish our draft strategies with a daily draft strategy and understand what you would do in DFS and how you would win those big bucks / head-to-head matchups in the DFS world.
Sounds fun.
As always, Neil, as always. We hit out 2 podcasts last week, bombarded the listeners, just one this week, but I expect it to be a doozy. And on that note, let's get on with the show and talk daily fantasy. So Neil, we've done standard, we've done dynasty, we've done best ball, and we thought we'd wrap it up talking DFS. We've done a lot of DFS chat over the years, give you teams of the week and stuff like that. If for those who aren't aware, how should you attack a DFS team compared to how you would attack a season-long team?
Well, the best thing about DFS, obviously, compared to season-long, is it's a new team every week. Obviously, the season-long team, you have your draft, you can trade, you can use the waiver wire and whatnot. But DFS, it's a new team every week. You get your salary cap, you'll get your 50,000, whatever it is, and you can build a team from a whole range of games. You could go every game at the weekend. You could just do a Thursday night slate. You could just do games that are 6 o'clock on a Sunday, or just the evening games, or just the late games. The range of options are incalculable. And within those games as well, there are 2 distinct types. There are head-to-head and there are tournaments. Now, head-to-head is, as it sounds, it's you against someone else. So you could, in that situation, you want to pick the best team you can with the money available to you. So that's where you'll have play situations like back in the day, David Johnson, no matter what, Christian McCaffrey, because things like that. You work out how you can fit these people in, and then you try and get the best team around them. DFS was probably like one of the first formats that encouraged stacking. Because it realised, the smart people playing it realised that the best way to maximise the amount of points you could score in a given week was by attaching a quarterback to his favourite receiver, or at least a receiver who would get a game. Another tactic that's popular is called running it back, which is where you will find a game that has a reasonably high point spread. You will have your quarterback and receiver, and if possible, you'll have a receiver from the same game, but from the other side. The big difference between head-to-head and tournaments is head-to-head you only need to outscore one person. Tournaments you need to outscore a lot of people. Now tournaments again can range from 10 to 12 to a massive field. DraftKings have their competition called the Millie Maker, where you can win $1 million. Obviously, a lot of people go in for that. The difference between these tournaments, of course, is price. You want to win $1 million. That's not going to cost you $1 to enter. You're going to have to seriously stump up to play in those tournaments. The difference in tournaments between head-to-head is you really want to try and find hidden gems. Some people have said in the past players like Deshaun Jackson I like him in best ball. Those players in DFS, you can try. It's difficult. You want to try and guess when they're going to have their boom week, because everyone's going to have, everyone. Most people are going to have Christian McCaffrey or Dalvin Cook. That's not how you find an edge. You find an edge by picking the team defense that all of a sudden gets 6 sacks and a defensive touchdown, or the kicker, not kickers, or the tight end who suddenly catches 13 passes for 150 balls. You try and get variance. The best way to try and win tournaments is to try and enter as many teams as you can. You don't want to enter the same team. You want to have a varied lineup, and you want to take advantage of variance and try and pick players that other people aren't picking.
Yeah, I think you're right, Neil. I think when you pick your standard league and your normal kind of overarch whole season thing, you always look for players who are consistent. You want them to score those 10 to 15 points every week. In DFS, you just want lads who are going to get you 30 points that week. You don't care the week after if they get 0, because you're not going to pick them the week after. So the stars and scrubs concept works really well. And I always find, as you talked about an idea of picking a high-scoring game, you should just pick it against a team who aren't very good, especially on defense. That doesn't mean some teams can be not very good and win 2 or 3 games, but be a middling defense. You want to play a team that's ranked 31, 32 in defense and use that stacking concept against that team. So if we believe that the Houston Texans are one of the worst teams and they're playing, the Indianapolis Colts that week, you might play 3 Indianapolis Colts, including Carson Wentz. Even if you don't believe he's the greatest quarterback, he may get 300 yards and 3 touchdowns that week. 2 of them to Michael Pittman, who you've also picked. Jonathan Taylor, may also get 100 yards and a score. You want to pick it in that kind of idea. It's very specific to that week. As you said, depending on where you're going about it, whether you're doing just Sunday or all week, you need to focus in and look at those matchups more specifically than when you would. If you pick a league and you're first pick in a draft and you get Christian McCaffrey, you're just playing every week, and it doesn't really matter who Christian McCaffrey's playing, you're just going to play him. But if Christian McCaffrey is playing a good defense in a week, you're just going to avoid him in DFS because you don't want that matchup. I think you're right to focus on, if you're doing head-to-head, your team may be more stable, whereas in your tournament there's a high to low variance in terms of some players who cost you 3,000 and some who cost you 10, because you want that. Because how you're actually going to win is most people who win that week or get into the top of the scoring chart will have those $10,000 players. However, they may not have the same $3,000 player that you have, and the difference in that player defines whether you win or lose that week.
Yeah, prime example would have been someone like, Deshaun Jackson, maybe last year in week 16 against Dallas.
The Claypool example.
Yeah.
Chase Claypool.
Yeah, no one was starting Chase Claypool in regular fantasy the week he played against the Eagles. But there will have been people who will have won an awful lot of money who will have put him in there because he was 3,000.
Correct.
Now, obviously, the week after, DraftKings especially, those prices will catch up. And he won't have been 3,000 the week after. But that doesn't matter. You don't pick him. But the week you want him is the week he is $2,500. Another good tactic as well as stacking in a high-scoring game, is you want to get a running back attached to a strong defense, because those correlate as well, especially if they're playing against a team that isn't as good. So you will expect that running back to have favourable game script. So that's more carries, that's more opportunities to score touchdowns against a defence that's playing against a team that's probably going to have to be catching up. They don't have to shut them out, but if they're sacking the quarterback and picking off passes, then that pays off as well.
I think if you're confident in your own ability to have a good team week on week, head-to-head with a single value is a good way of going about it. If you like that more of a gamble, and it is a gamble, so it should be noted that this is more gambling than the other areas of fantasy. So you should be careful when you do it and not get too involved if you're that way inclined. Is that in the league concept, what you can do is pay $1, win 50,000, right? But you need to understand that the chances of you doing that are very slim, because there's a lot of people doing it, and a lot of people will pick the same players as you do. And as I said, it's those 3,000. So if you feel confident in your ability to draft, head to head is probably better for you. If you're more of a fun, 1 week I might just do really well and win $100 in a $50,000 game, then you're probably talking more on a league concept.
Yeah, an awful lot of websites, some that I write for, they do have a lot of DFS content, especially like Player Profiler, Numberfire. They will have lineup generators. So if you don't have a good feel for it yourself and just want to get an idea, you can go to these teams. They'll generate the lineup, have a look at it, and see what they've come up with. And again, you don't have to use it, but it gives you an idea of the type of player, the type of matchup that you should be looking at. It's great fun. I mean, especially in head-to-head. I have won matchups. It'll shock people, but I'm not a high roller. No. I play $1 games to win $1.80. That's fine by me. That's enough excitement I can take. I mean, God, if I want to rush, I'll just stand up without expecting it. Then my head starts spinning. But you'll find sometimes that even if you win or even if you lose, DraftKings especially, they don't show you your opponent's lineup until they've played. So all you'll know is, after the first slate of games on Sunday, I'm ahead by how many? I've got one player left to play. He's got 2 players left to play. And you look at the rest of the team, you're like, oh my God, we have virtually the same lineup. Those players just need to be different. Yeah.
Excellent. Any pitfalls, Neil, that you should avoid? I think what we should say, as I don't want to pay lip service to, but only do this if you've got the money to do it. You can do this for free. They have free games in daily, and you should do that. Only put the money in that you can afford, and don't use it as a revenue stream. Absolutely not. But in the actual game itself, Neil, is there any pitfalls that you would suggest that people should avoid when picking their daily fantasy teams?
Well, there are people who are professional DFS players in America. There are people that literally, there's Drew Dinkenmeyer is like the big poster boy for that because he won the first Millie Maker. So these people have acquired a significant bankroll, but that means they've lost an awful lot of money as well. So only have it if you can lose it. And as with most gambling things, it's as you say, you want to pay lip service or not. We don't. We know it's a serious business. If it stops being fun, stop doing it. As you say, if you want just a bit of light-hearted fun, there are $1 games you can play. There are free games if you just want to test it out. But do not be embarking on I think there are some fields, you see them, and it's $2,000 to enter. Well, A, you've got to have a big bankroll, and B, you've got to have big balls to do that. I haven't. So if it's not fun, don't do it. It's not a guarantee. You're not guaranteed to do it. You might win the $1 games. You might have 4 games in 1 week and you win all of them, the $1 ones, and think, oh, do you know what? I'll step up. Yeah, here's a little hint. When you step up, you're going up against better gamblers than you. Okay. And the only way you get to be that good is if you lose a lot doing it. And if you don't want to do that, stick to the $1 leagues with me.
You'll find them. You'll find them quite easily. Neil, let's move on and let's talk about the AFC West. As always, Neil, standard fare, big question, fantasy darling, more likely to be discussed with the 4 teams from the AFC West who this year are facing the NFC East, the AFC North, one AFC South team, one AFC West team, and one NFC North team. Let's start with Homer Simpson's favourite team, the Denver Broncos. Neil, the big question for the Denver Broncos is, how good does the quarterback play have to be to make this a playoff team?
Better than they've got. If, by all accounts, Drew Lock wins the starting quarterback job, and there are suspicions that if he plays well in whatever action he sees on Saturday, he has sewn the job up. Congratulations, you're going nowhere. Be great for fantasy. Now, as you say, those divisions, the games they're playing against, these are the types of teams that you'll probably be looking at all season at their games and thinking, yeah, we need a piece of this, because the NFC East defenses are trash generally. This has a couple of good defenses, but some great offensive players. But I digress. The Denver Broncos defense is very good. It's a bit old. The pieces are getting older. They have some intriguing skill position players like Jerry Jeudy, Javonte Williams, Noah Fant, Albert O. The last time I checked my calendar, it was 2021. You're not winning a Super Bowl with a good defense, with a quarterback who completes less than 60% of his passes and throws interceptions like they're going out of fashion. It is not happening. You are wasting the prime of your young players, and you are fooling yourselves. But when you take a cornerback ahead of a quarterback, when your quarterbacks are Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater, I don't care.
It's tough to argue, right? Because, you know, as we said, for multiple of these teams, you know, if you haven't got a quarterback, you're really up the creek without a paddle. I think this team is very similar to Washington in terms of the ability of the team, the skill on defense. It's took 15 years for the NFL to get onto the fact that other people other than Vic Fangio can run Vic Fangio's defense. It's like, this Brandon Staley, he's amazing. He's running this cool new defense. You're like, Vic Fangio's been running that for a decade. Don't know if you've been paying attention. Vic is a fantastic defensive coordinator and an okay head coach. And he's a defensive coach, which we've discussed many times. We are not always au fait with. He seems to get more involved in the offense than I would like from a defensive point of view. But all that beside, they have Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater as their quarterbacks, and that ain't paying any bills. Now, if Drew Lock improves on last year, they could win 8 games. Do you know what I mean? Like, they could, 8-9 games, fine. But it's not going to get them anywhere. And I think we briefly touched on it last week, and you've kind of mentioned it already. But the asinine comment by the general manager of the Denver Broncos that it's harder to get a shutdown corner than it is to get a quarterback, so that's why they drafted one, is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. Now, you know and I know, whether anybody else likes to admit it, is the reason they took Patrick Surtain Jr. was because they believed and assumed that Aaron Rodgers was going to be a Denver Bronco. And I don't want to hear any noise around anything else. So don't then tell me you took Patrick Surtain Jr., who has the chance to be a fantastic player, over Justin Fields, because it's harder to find Patrick Surtain than it is Justin Fields. Because it's not. It's just not. Never has been. Never will be.
And also, it doesn't matter. If you're trying to find you can find cornerbacks. Every team's got them. Some of them are of a different standard than the others. Score more points than the opposition.
Yeah, right.
If you're saying, we need a shutdown corner, you're saying we can't outscore teams. we need to restrict them. Well, that's on you. And the quarterbacks that they have swung and missed on since Peyton Manning retired, let's list some of these names, shall we? Trevor Siemian, Paxton Lynch, Brock Osweiler, Case Keenum, Joe Flacco, Drew Lock, Teddy Bridgewater, and now you stop.
Yeah, right, I know. It's crazy, right? And as you said, lots of talent, right? Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Albert O, Noah Fant, Javonte Williams. Really good defense. Chance to be a top 5 defense in the league. But does it matter? And unfortunately, because it's 2021, not 2001, it doesn't matter. Because this team won't be able to score enough points to win enough games, especially in this division, to get where they believe they need to be. Now, taking Patrick Surtain Jr. next year, like this year, knowing that next year in 2022, Aaron Rodgers is your quarterback, and you've still got all that young talent, that's probably not a problem. That probably makes sense. But at the moment, it doesn't make sense because you haven't got a quarterback.
Yeah. And, when Von Miller's a year older next year and can't get after the other quarterbacks, so your defense is downgraded a touch there. Oh, great having a shutdown corner when you can't rush the passer, isn't it?
Fantasy darling on the Denver Broncos, Neil.
Well, it's hard to say a darling because, as I say, the offense is going to be stifled because Drew Lock is going to put them into more bad situations than he'll get them out of. But Melvin Gordon is going as running back 32. If he was the only game in town, then that would be far too high. Is he going to split time with Javonte Williams? Probably. They traded up to get Javonte Williams, which again is another fabulous move in 2021, trading up for running backs. Bravo. But Melvin Gordon showed last year that he's not complete dust. He's gone downhill as a receiver. He was a handy pass catcher when he played for the Chargers. Now he's not. Javonte Williams is a much better receiver, I think. But if you actually look last season at their two numbers, obviously Javonte Williams was playing in college and in a conference where tackling was optional, and Melvin Gordon was playing in the NFL. A lot of their efficiency numbers are quite similar, and also the way that they were used in terms of the number of attempts they were getting a game. So I think it could be an annoying bit of a timeshare / committee. But I think at the moment, I'd rather take Melvin Gordon at his price than Javonte Williams at his, even though I suspect Williams is probably 2 good games away from winning the job.
The over-under for the Denver Broncos is 7.5. Neil, will they be more likely to be discussed by draftniks in Week 17 in the Super Bowl or not at all?
Not at all, because they are in quarterback purgatory. And the only way you get out of that is by sucking. And the rest of the roster is not bad enough that they will be terrible. So they're not going to be in play for one of the big ones next year. I say, are they going to have to trade for next year? That's a problem for next year. But they're not going to win enough games to make themselves bad enough. Or they're not going to lose enough games to make themselves bad enough. And they're not going to win enough games that they're going to win the Super Bowl. They are, in my opinion, the quintessential middle-of-the-road team.
First 3 games, Neil. At the Giants, at the Jaguars, at home to the Jets.
They could go through,
That's what I'm saying, right? They also play Detroit. They play the Bengals. They obviously play the Eagles. Dallas, Washington, Las Vegas twice. Strength of schedule is grim. But I'm with you. Because, I think they are a middle-of-the-road team. If they finished 9-8, will I be shocked? Absolutely not. The talent on this team that can carry you with a bang average to below average quarterback. And
can't carry you all the way, though.
Can't carry you all. You're not getting 12 wins. You're not. 9-8 might be third in this division. And that's a problem. So, they also play the Steelers, who I don't think are great either, in week 5. And then the Raiders in week 6 in Denver. So they could play Thursday night football, week 7, and be 6-1. But they could probably still finish 9-8.
Well, if you haven't got a great quarterback, it can help when you have an offensive genius calling the plays. Oh, they've got Pat Shermer.
Next, let's talk about the Kansas City Chiefs. I hear they
Not the middle of the road team.
Yeah, actual offensive genius, Big Red himself. The big question, Neil, is based on the shellacking the O-line got in the Super Bowl, do the O-line changes in Kansas City make the Chiefs Super Bowl favourites again from the AFC?
Yes, because the quarterback is Patrick Mahomes. And if you ask 31 other teams in the NFL if they want Patrick Mahomes, and if any of them say no, they're lying to themselves, they're lying to the fans, and more importantly, they're lying to the quarterback they've already got. Now, Josh Allen is an emerging player after a great third season. Yeah. Tom Brady is an old player, arguably the GOAT, and will always be, because whatever Patrick Mahomes does, Brady beat him in a Super Bowl. Mahomes can never wash that away. But Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL and is going to be the best quarterback in the NFL for quite some time. So if you have taken aggressive steps to protect him, and we know their defense isn't great, but it's above average, and you've got an elite offensive play caller, well, you're going to be in the lead in a lot more games than you're going to be trailing. So while it is very hard to go back to the Super Bowl after you've lost it, it's even harder to get to the Super Bowl 3 years in a row. But it's going to have to take something to go wrong, I think, for the Chiefs, for them not to do it.
I found it interesting, Neil. And I don't know if you've read the article. Patrick Mahomes was talking about issues he's had and how he himself had noticed and discussed how he was dropping too far back, basically due to the fact that, I don't know if it was fear of getting hit, but he was trying to make plays, and therefore, because his offensive line had been so bad, he was trying to make up for it. And then almost in a Sam Darnoldism, seeing ghosts everywhere around him because of the issues with his offensive line. Obviously, self-scouting is important, and that's a good thing. But also getting, people who aren't traffic cones or, people who are competent on the offensive line will help with that. This team scores points. The offensive line was terrible against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's undoubted. Watch the game. That was the Super Bowl, though. It wasn't like these issues were greatly exposed. They were exposed, but not to such an extent prior to that, because I'm pretty sure they won all the games they needed to win, especially in the playoffs, to get to the Super Bowl. So, good on Kansas City for saying, we need to fix this, we need to address it. It makes perfect sense, because they would like to win the Super Bowl, not lose it. But I sometimes think, the offensive line was a joke last year. Yeah, no. My team wins like 6 games a year, right? Like, I know what bad looks like. And they got to the Super Bowl, so let's all calm down a little bit. As you said, they've got the best quarterback in terms of talent at the moment in the league, who in about half an hour will be underpaid, which is frightening. They have the best tight end in the league in terms of offensive weapon. They have Tyreek Hill. They have a multitude of players and, as you quite rightly point out, in Andy Reid, one of the best offensive play callers in the history of the NFL. So, the demise of the Kansas City Chiefs seems a long way off from where I'm looking.
They have the advantage that they're one of the few teams in the NFL that you can't really beat by stopping, because you can't. Now, let's say the Buccaneers did, but as we said, that's because there was an offensive line that had been slowly disintegrating over the course of the season, and it reached breaking point in the Super Bowl. That's a sad confluence of events. It happens. Life sucks. Get a helmet. But very, very rarely, there's no team saying, okay, I mean, the Super Bowl was probably the worst game Patrick Mahomes has played from a statistical point of view. Watch him in that game. He is not the reason they lost. He was Superman.
There's at least two unbelievable plays that hit people in the hands that they drop.
Yeah. You can't catch him for you, boys.
Fantasy darling for the Kansas City Chiefs, Neil.
Well, last year, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was being taken in the first round. He was seen as, well, he's a running back playing on the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, so therefore he must be a fantasy stud. And then he did the unforgivable of struggling as a rookie. Now, granted, from the 1 yard line or there or thereabouts, he was awful. No push, couldn't get in. Could this be because their offensive line wasn't that great? Possibly. Now we are seeing a slight overcorrection, and now Clyde Edwards-Helaire is the running back 14, and he's going off the board in the third round. He probably hasn't regained enough of our trust to make him a running back 1, but depending on how you start your draft, if you're taking him as your running back 2, or if you are making him your running back 1 because you've landed, I don't know, Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, and then Keenan Allen or something like that in the second round, or A.J. Brown, then I think I could live with it. So where he's going now, I think he's put it this way, if he'd been going this time last year, we'd all be loving it. But because he was going as a first rounder last year, he was disappointing.
Over-under for the Kansas City Chiefs is, not surprisingly, high, and it's 12. Where will he be discussed, Neil, by draftniks in Week 18 in the Super Bowl, or not at all?
I think this is one of the simpler ones, and they are Super Bowl contenders and will be for the foreseeable. We don't have to talk about them next year. So.
What I would say is in opposition to the Denver Broncos schedule, the start of the Kansas City Chiefs schedule is difficult. First game against Cleveland in a repeat of a very tough game they had in the playoffs. They're then at Baltimore on Sunday night.
Who they own.
But it's still a tough game.
Mm-hmm.
They then play the Chargers. They're then at Philadelphia. Enjoy. And then they play Buffalo. And then some interesting games which they will win, but might cause not issues, but then you go at Washington, at Tennessee. But anyway, this team is the best team in this division. I think it's still the best team in the AFC. 12 seems about right. They're fun to watch. I hope to see a lot of them during the year. And if you don't, then always catch him up on Game Pass. Although probably not on all 22, as that may never return. Not that I watched that. Just I felt like every other podcast talking about the NFL and Game Pass has mentioned it, so I thought it'd be rude if we didn't.
Down with this sort of thing.
Exactly. Neil, next team, the LA Chargers. That's right, I said LA first time.
Well played.
Thank you. The big question: they have a rookie head coach and a second-year quarterback, but somehow I feel like this team is playoffs or bust. Is this right?
I wouldn't say playoffs or bust. I think there's an awful lot of goodwill about the Chargers. Now, we've seen this play before.
Yeah, many years ago.
I mean, I remember a 3 or 4 year spell where it was said pre-season every year, pound for pound, the most talented roster in the NFL is the San Diego Chargers.
Until he played New England in a playoff game.
Yeah. Obviously, Justin Herbert was sensational as a rookie when no one really expected him to be, not least the Chargers, or they would have started him instead of puncturing Tyrod Taylor's lung just to get him on the field, he says, jokingly.
We'd like to state for the record that we do not believe that was a deliberate act.
No, it was medical incompetence. It was not a strategic approach. The offense this year, assuming Joe Lombardi has learned from his last stint as an offensive coordinator when he was with the Lions and made them borderline unwatchable. Not say borderline, he made the Lions unwatchable. Imagine how bad you've got to be to do that. he has now spent the last 5 years learning at the knee of Sean Payton. So obviously there's a lot of people thinking that this offense is going to look like the Saints. Well, is that a bad thing? Considering that the Saints offense has been exceptional over the years with a Hall of Fame quarterback, admittedly, with diminishing arm strength. Justin Herbert's arm is fine. It's not dropping off. He can't not complete little dunk-offs. He's got Keenan Allen, still one of the more underrated players in the league. Got Austin Eckler, who loves his fantasy football. Again, a running back who dealt with injuries last year, but on a per-game basis was an absolute superstar. Got some young pieces around them. Mike Williams is a decent wide receiver too. They've got a couple of talented tight ends at various stages of their career. They've invested in the offensive line because they realise if you've got a quarterback, you can protect him. Bold approach. And they've got a talented defence. Brandon Staley seems to be one of those defensive coaches who realises how important it is to stop the pass and to pass. I like that philosophy. I like that partnership. We've been hurt before by the Chargers. If they didn't have Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs in this division, this is probably the best offense in the division. It's certainly, I think, the most talented defense other than the Broncos, but the Broncos are a lot older. This is young. They're still flying around. They've still got players entering their prime. And I just think there's an awful lot to like about the Chargers. The biggest obstacle they have to climb over is history.
Yeah, it is. What I would say is I listened to a lot of the Athletic Football Show. Robert Mays, I think he's great, and mostly with Lindsey Jones or Nate Tyson. They were talking about the Chargers, and what I found interesting was kind of differences in approaches related to Joe Lombardi. So at the Saints, they are still implementing game plans up until Saturday night. So changes are happening multiple times. Plays are being added in, taken out, whatever. In Detroit under Jim Caldwell, it was very like Indianapolis under Manning, and they expected your offensive game plan to be in by Tuesday. And it didn't change. So there's a suggestion that Lombardi didn't deal well with that, and hence the struggles that they had in Detroit, and that because he's in charge and he gets to decide, and because Staley is a defensive coach and is going to give him some autonomy, that it will be more like the Saints in terms of how long it takes to implement the game plan, and that should fit him better. They have talent. I think a lot of people didn't believe that Justin Herbert would be an NFL quarterback, and he has proved them very, very wrong in year one. You put your hand up, same, right? But he was fantastic. I love Keenan Allen. I love a lot of these skill players, and I want this team to be good. I want to be clear. I don't know why, but I have a soft spot for this team, and I want them to do well. It'd be nice if they had a fan base. Unfortunately, they don't. They left it, and no one followed them, and that's how it works. Okay, but I hope they're good. But I do have to say, it's a second-year QB and a rookie head coach. So, should we be expecting them to go 12-5? I don't know. But I think they've got a chance to. And I think they have a real chance to be a playoff team.
It's the quarterback, the goodwill you get when you have a promising young quarterback, as opposed to a quarterback that you try and convince yourself is good after an up and down rookie season. We've seen a great start from Herbert. It would be heartbreaking if that rookie season was his best year. But I think we've seen enough to make us think, no, he can still grow, he can still get better. They're going to be in situations where they're not running plays, and I mean running plays with no timeouts and the clock expiring. They're going to be sensible in clock management situations. It's as I say, these are all great signs, but it's still the Chargers, and we're still waiting for that shoe to drop. We're waiting for the ACL of someone to go. We're waiting for someone to catch the flu. It's the Chargers. They've hurt us all before.
Who is the fantasy darling on the Chargers, Neil?
Well, there are a couple, I think. If you look at their ADP, as I say, Mike Williams is going as the wide receiver 47. Now, they've talked about using Mike Williams in the Michael Thomas role. Because basically, because as we say, Joe Lombardi coming from the Saints, I personally would rather see Keenan Allen in that role. So he eats up all the targets because Allen loves racking up the yak. Yards after the catch is not a skill that Mike Williams has shown us he's particularly adept at. I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm just saying that in the past, what we've seen from Williams is he wins downfield, and he should still be allowed to do that because he is arguably quicker than Keenan Allen. He's a lot more physical. It would be nice to see Mike Williams make a catch that he didn't end up on his back after doing. He is allowed to catch the ball and run. We need to stress this to him. But as I say, wide receiver 47, you are on a wide receiver 2 on a team that have said they're going to pass the ball, I think is good value. And another one, if you want, it's like the real cheapest way to get a piece of this offense, is Jared Cook. All he's been is efficient the last couple of years. Granted, you look at the quarterbacks he's played with, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, I think they could make me a bit efficient. Nah, they couldn't. He's going to tight end 19. Even if he gets wheeled out in the red zone and that's all they use him, what do we want from tight ends? Touchdowns. What can Jared Cook give us, even if he only gets 3 targets a week? Touchdowns.
The over-under for the Chargers is 9. Will they be discussed by draftniks in Week 18 in the Super Bowl or not at all?
I think it's definitely a Week 18er because they're not going to win this division, I don't think. But one of those playoff spots, it's theirs for the taking.
I agree. Week 18 seems to make sense. I hate watching my own team. You know this, Neil. Week 1, LA Chargers at the Washington football team in the 6 o'clock window is a spectacular game and will have to be a double screener for that and Red Zone because that will be probably the best game in the 6 o'clock window. They obviously have to play the Chiefs twice. They also play Baltimore. They have an interesting game against the New England Patriots and probably brings back terrible memories for all Chargers fans. This team has a chance to be a playoff team, and gun to head right now, I would probably pick them as one of the multiple wildcard teams. And I hope that's the case because that means the work of Justin Herbert and Staley have gone well and good things are happening for the Chargers, and that can only be a good thing. Final team, Neil, the Vegas Raiders. The big question, how would you fix the Raiders?
I would start by asking the coach with the 10-year contract to go somewhere else and take his puppet with him. This team, we've always known, since I've been watching the NFL, and I suspect since you've been watching it, given your years of seniority, if there is a conventional way to do something, the Raiders will try and find an unconventional way to do it. It's what Al Davis wanted. It's what they did. For large chunks of their history, it worked. It hasn't worked for 20 years. They've had one playoff season since they lost the Super Bowl in 2002. And that year was just one of those magical fairy tale seasons where everything went right. Since then, they've been largely awful. The last couple of years, they've started well and then faded. Well, as we've always said, that comes down to coaching. If your players are, I'm not saying giving up, that would be unfair. But if your players are all of a sudden wavering, they're not doing what they were doing, why aren't you keeping on them? Why aren't they still meeting those same standards? They took the unusual step of taking the strength of the team, which was the offensive line, and ripping it to pieces this off-season. For no reason other than it's just what they wanted to do. The players were still productive. They were still protecting Derek Carr, who had a great season last year, and I will hear no arguments to the contrary.
I paid for the fact that he has a great season last year, Neil. That's no doubt.
But their offensive philosophy is they want to run the ball. That's why they took Josh Jacobs in the first round. So then they spend $11 million a year on Kenyon Drake, who arguably is a much better pass catcher than Josh Jacobs. So we can rule that out for Jacobs this year. He's not going to catch passes. They drafted Henry Ruggs, in the first round when history tells us, please stop taking the speedy wide receivers at that point because you're only going to be disappointed. And then they let Nelson Aguilar walk, but to be fair, he outplayed his contract very early on last year. The defense is terrible. They have had 63 sacks or something like that since 2018. Sorry, 83 sacks. I think Khalil Mack has had 38 in that span. And why do I say since 2018? Well, that's when he let him go. They can't rush the passer. They have interesting talent at cornerback. They have iffy safety play. And they have high-priced linebackers who can't cover. It's a team that I think the coach and the general manager know what they want it to be, but I don't think they know what it is.
I think the issue for the head coach and the GM is they've got long-term contracts but don't seem to want to be involved in long-term strategies. So they both believe that every year you rip it up and start again. Or that's what it seems. They also have what was the face of the NFL Network's draft coverage, who doesn't seem to be able to draft. And when he does, only seems to be able to draft from places and games that I would have seen on my telly on a Saturday night on BT Sport. That's an issue for me. Like, I'm not saying that the best players don't come from Alabama, but, you know, maybe you should pick players that didn't always go to the Final Four of the national title. Because if I look at the schedule, if I look at your draft class, all of them seem to. As you quite rightly point out, strength of the team, offensive line, let's rip it up. But why? I don't understand. Let's sign Henry Ruggs and then not play to his strengths in any way, shape or form. Like, let's draft players on defense because our defense isn't good, but then draft bad players who don't do what we needed them to do. And everybody knew, with the exception of us, that they weren't going to do what we wanted them to do. It's concerning, right? That this, as I said, is a coach with a 10-year plan who we know has always been a tinkerer or a blow it up and start again merchant. I don't want that from a 10-year coach. I want someone who's got a long-term vision, a long-term plan, and sticks to it. And even if it doesn't work to start with, we know what he's trying to do. I have no idea what Gruden and Mayock are trying to do with the Raiders. I really don't. And they both seem nice and are great on TV and, good soundbites, talkers, whatever. But for me, there's no plan. There's no logic. There's no strategy. Derek Carr's a good quarterback. But again, I come back to the same thing. I don't see him safe in his position because, this has got to be the longest that John Gruden's ever had a QB start for him. He's got to have had... Right now, Derek Carr's got to have had the most starts by a Gruden quarterback. So he's got rid of everybody else on the team nearly. So surely Derek's next in line for no other reason than John Gruden gets bored of seeing the same faces in his locker room every week. I don't know. Fantasy darling for the Raiders, Neil.
It's not a team replete with fantasy options. Obviously, Darren Waller is probably going off the board as the tight end too. That's fine. He's going to soak up an awful lot of volume. He has an efficient partnership with Derek Carr. He wins where Carr wins. But if you're looking at secondary options, I don't like Josh Jacobs where he's going because I say he's not going to catch passes. And this is a bad team. So they're going to take him off the field and put Kenny and Drake on. I don't like Kenny and Drake because what if they do well and then all of a sudden Drake doesn't have a role? So we're looking at this team and we're taking shots. Now, Brian Edwards was a prodigious performer. Was he South Carolina? I think he was. He broke out at a ridiculously early age. He wasn't great as a rookie because he wasn't really given the chance. Nelson Aguilar came in and was the guy. But by all accounts, Edwards is going to be the starting wide receiver. He's going off the board now with the wide receiver 83. That should tell you that drafters don't have a great deal of hope for what he can achieve. But if he's out there, and this is a bad team, and I think we all agree it's going to be, he's going to be, a team's going to be passing, he's going to be commanding targets. There are a lot of targets behind Darren Waller to be had. He's not a pick. I'm put it this way, I'm not taking him any earlier than that, I don't think. But if he is there, I'll be happy to take him. Just expect that within 3 weeks, he's one of those players who could well be churned off your roster. If you've got to go into week 1 and he's your starter in fantasy, you're probably in trouble. But as someone at the end of your bench, if he goes, 8 catches, 150 yards and a touchdown in week 1, you might be looking at yourself thinking you're quite clever.
The over-under is 8, which is really high, actually. More likely to be discussed by draftniks in week 18 in the Super Bowl or not at all?
I think they're in between the not at all and draftniks, because we've seen them get off to quite strong starts. Don't think that'll happen this year, and then fall away. So we know that they do. Occasionally they'll surprise you. They'll have the game like they had last year where they went in and cleaned the Chiefs' clocks for them. It just happens sometimes, but I don't see them being consistent enough to win as many games as that line says. So, slight cop-out. No, I'll go bold. I'm going to say draftniks.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think when they played on offense, they have a decent offense. I don't know what it's going to be like this year, given the offensive line changes and issues that they're going to have. I think they're the worst team in this division. Draftnik 5-6 wins, so possibly that would be draftniks, I would guess. So yeah, I'm probably with you, Neil. I always find it weird that they always have the double header week 1 game, and the Raiders always play in that one, and this time it's at home to Baltimore. So enjoy that for the people staying up, or as what will probably happen is by the time you wake up that night, that morning, the next morning, they're still playing. Neil, I am going Chiefs, Chargers, Broncos, Raiders, with the Chiefs and the Chargers making the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't even think it's close.
No. And I expect, as I've said multiple times, I expect Aaron Rodgers to be in this division next year, and that will be a whole barrel of fun. I understand why he would avoid it given the quarterback situation, but I also look at the roster and think it's probably the best one, because let's be honest, the only other one with such a deep roster would be Washington, and that just will not happen. So therefore it will be Denver.
Yeah, that has wings but cannot fly.
Correct, absolutely, totally agree. Neil, before we wrap up our previews with the NFC West next week, which should be a doozy, where can people catch you?
Catch me on the Twitter at ndutton13. The piece I've written this week for Rotoviz, it's a look at a tight end to target in each of the first 10 rounds of your draft. So there's a few names there that will look familiar. You may think, ooh, I don't really fancy him there in the 4th round, but if you all of a sudden see him drop to the 6th, you'll know I think he's a value. After 10 rounds, who gives one really about tight ends? So yeah, that's out now on the Rotoviz. Go read it. Tell me I'm an idiot.
Neil, let's break some news here. By the time you listen to this, everybody, Neil, you will have been on another podcast with a friend of the show. Not just any podcast. What podcast will you be on?
I will be chatting with our friend Liz Loza on Thursday's edition of the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast. I'm not sure why they asked me. I feel sorry for Liz because, say, this week, Scott Pianowski spoke to Adam Levitan, Andy Berron spoke to Dave Krieg, and Matt Harmon spoke to Sigmund Bloom, and Liz gets stuck with me. So that must be, if you want to know the definition of short straw, I think that's it.
I think, let's be honest, Neil, she got a choice. She misses speaking to a northern person from the United Kingdom, and therefore the only choice was you. So all the best. I believe it's on just after this, so enjoy it, and we'll look forward to listening to you, and hopefully it'll be the start of your Yahoo career. I look forward to being dumped. Neil, that is it for this week. As always, stay safe, people. These top guys are out, and we will see you next week.